3 years. 1,095 days. That's how long we had been Liam and Sarah, a singular unit in the eyes of our friends, our families, and most importantly, ourselves. 3 years of Sunday morning pancakes, late-night whispered secrets under shared blankets, holidays spent navigating each other's quirky relatives, and the quiet comfort of simply existing in the same space. 3 years culminating in hushed discussions about forever, about maybe someday, a small house with a garden, a dog named Murphy, and children who would inherit his dimpled smile and my stubborn streak. 3 years, and then nothing. It wasn't a fight, not a dramatic blow-up, no simmering resentment that finally boiled over. It was a gradual fade, a slow dimming of the light until it sputtered and went out entirely. First, the good morning texts stopped. Then, the evening calls became less frequent, shorter, punctuated by vague excuses about work deadlines and late meetings. Our weekend plans, once meticulously crafted and eagerly anticipated, dissolved into maybe laters, and I'll see how I feel. At first I was patient, concerned even. Liam worked in finance. Pressure was part of the job description. I sent supportive messages, offered to bring over dinner, suggested a relaxing night in. My messages were met with curt replies, often hours later. My calls went unanswered, straight to voicemail. And then, the silence became absolute. His phone went dead. Social media profiles vanished. He was simply gone, ghosted. The term felt flippant, almost comical for something that felt like a physical tearing apart. Ghosted after 3 years. It was absurd. It was cruel. It was incomprehensible. My initial confusion morphed into a frantic anxiety. Had something happened to him? An accident? Was he hurt, stranded somewhere, unable to reach out? I called his office, only to be told he no longer worked there. His employment abruptly terminated a week prior. I contacted his friends, who expressed surprise and concern, claiming they hadn't heard from him either. His parents, bless their kind but bewildered hearts, were equally in the dark. They hadn't spoken to him in weeks, assuming we were together, happy, as we always seemed to be. The police, when I eventually went to them, listened politely but dismissed my fears. A missing person report couldn't be filed without concrete evidence of foul play, especially for an adult with no known medical conditions or history of instability. "He's probably just taking some time for himself, miss," the officer had said, his tone laced with weary condescension. People do that sometimes, especially after relationships end. But relationships end. They don't just vanish. Not 3-year relationships. Not the kind Liam and I had. Or so I thought. The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, unanswered questions echoing in my mind, and a gnawing emptiness that settled in my chest. I replayed every conversation, every memory, searching for clues, for a flicker of foreshadowing that I had missed. Had I been blind? Had our perfect facade been a carefully constructed lie, masking a deeper truth I had been too naive to see? Doubt became my constant companion, whispering insidious possibilities in the quiet hours of the night. Was I not good enough? Had I done something wrong? Had he simply grown tired of me, found someone else, and lacked the courage to face me? The thought stung, but it was almost preferable to the gaping void of the unknown. At least it was an explanation, however painful. But even that felt inadequate. Liam wasn't the type to run. He was kind, considerate, if sometimes a little reserved. He wasn't a coward. Or was he? The man I thought I knew, the man I had built my future around, had evaporated into thin air, leaving behind only a ghost of memories and a gaping hole in my life. 3 months passed. The seasons shifted from spring to summer. The vibrant green of new leaves deepened into the heavy foliage of July. Life, stubbornly, relentlessly, continued to move forward, even as mine felt irrevocably stuck in a perpetual state of bewildered grief. I went through the motions: work, errands, social engagements. A pale imitation of my former self. My friends rallied around me, offering support, sympathy, and unsolicited advice. "He's a jerk, Sarah. Forget him. You deserve better. You'll find someone else." Their words were meant to comfort, but they felt hollow, meaningless. They hadn't known Liam. Not really. They hadn't seen the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, the gentle way he held my hand, the unwavering certainty in his voice when he told me he loved me. Or perhaps they had seen something I hadn't. Perhaps everyone else had seen the cracks in our foundation, the fragility beneath the surface, while I had been too blinded by love to notice. The ghosting, I realized, wasn't just about Liam disappearing. It was about the shattering of my own reality, the dismantling of the future I had so confidently envisioned. It was about the agonizing realization that I had been living a lie, or at least a half-truth. And the worst part was, I had no idea why. No closure, no explanation, just silence. And then, after 3 months of deafening silence, a knock on my door. The sound was hesitant, almost timid, barely audible above the hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic noise filtering through my open window. I almost ignored it, dismissing it as a stray leaflet or a neighbor's misdirected delivery. But it came again, a little louder this time, a distinct rapping of knuckles against wood. Curiosity, a rare flicker in the dull landscape of my days, stirred within me. Who would be at my door at this hour? It was late, almost 10 p.m., and I wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, I approached the door, peering through the peephole. My breath hitched in my throat. My heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing in my ears. It was him. Liam. Standing on my doorstep, bathed in the soft glow of the porch light, looking different, thinner, maybe. His eyes seemed shadowed, weary, but it was undeniably him. The familiar curve of his jaw, the unruly dark hair that always fell across his forehead, the hesitant set of his shoulders. My mind went blank. Disbelief warred with a surge of something akin to hope? No, not hope. Not yet. Too much had happened. Too much pain had been endured for hope to bloom so easily. More like shock. Utter, paralyzing shock. For 3 months, I had imagined every possible scenario, every conceivable explanation for his disappearance. Kidnapping, amnesia, a secret double life. Even in my darkest moments, death. But never, not once, had I imagined this. Him, simply showing up. As if nothing had happened. As if 3 months of agonizing silence could be erased with a knock on the door. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, hesitating for a moment, my knuckles brushing against the cool metal. What should I do? Slam the door in his face? Demand answers? Break down in tears? I didn't know. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger, hurt, confusion. And beneath it all, a fragile, flickering ember of something. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart, and slowly, deliberately turned the knob. The door swung inwards, revealing Liam standing there, his eyes fixed on mine, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak, didn't move. He just stood there. A ghost from my past materialized in the present. Liam. My voice was barely a whisper, raspy from disuse, unfamiliar even to my own ears. He flinched slightly at the sound of his name, as if startled out of a trance. "Sarah," he finally said, his voice low, hoarse, a shadow of the warm, familiar tones I remembered. Can I come in?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken words, with the weight of 3 months of silence. My gaze swept over him, taking in every detail. The dark circles under his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands, the way he avoided direct eye contact. He looked haunted, but haunted by what? By me? By guilt? Or by something else entirely? I hesitated for another moment, my mind still reeling, struggling to process the reality of his presence. Then slowly, I stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," I said, my voice still trembling, but firm now, laced with a hint of steel. He stepped inside, crossing the threshold as if entering a foreign land. I closed the door behind him, the click echoing in the sudden silence of my apartment. We stood there, facing each other in the dim hallway, the space between us thick with unspoken accusations, unanswered questions, and the ghosts of a love that had seemingly died. He still hadn't met my gaze, his eyes fixed on the floor, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn jacket. He began, then stopped, swallowing hard. "I know I owe you an explanation." The words were barely audible, mumbled almost, as if he was ashamed to speak them aloud. An explanation? Yes, that was what I deserved, what I had been craving for months. But now that he was here, standing before me, offering it, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. What could he possibly say that would justify 3 months of silence, 3 months of agonizing uncertainty? What explanation could erase the pain, the confusion, the betrayal I had felt? My anger, simmering beneath the surface for weeks, began to bubble up, threatening to erupt. "An explanation," I repeated, my voice rising, laced with sarcasm. "You think explanation even begins to cover it, Liam? You vanished. You disappeared off the face of the earth. Do you have any idea what I've been through? What I've been thinking?" He finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. They were filled with a pain that mirrored my own, a deep, raw anguish that momentarily silenced my anger. "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I'm so sorry." Sorry? Was that it? Sorry? For 3 months of torment? For shattering my heart into a million pieces? For leaving me to pick up the fragments alone? "Sorry isn't enough, Liam," I said, my voice trembling, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "It's not even close." He nodded, his gaze dropping back to the floor. "I know," he repeated, "but please just let me explain." He led me to the living room, his movements hesitant, almost apologetic. He sat on the edge of the sofa, his posture stiff, his gaze darting around the room as if he didn't quite recognize the space we had once shared. I remained standing, arms crossed, watching him, waiting. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece, a constant reminder of the time that had passed, the time we had lost. Finally, he took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping slightly, and began to speak. "It started a few weeks before Before I left, he said, his voice still low, hesitant, I started getting these calls. Calls? What kind of calls? My brow furrowed, confusion mixing with my lingering anger. What calls, Liam? I asked, my voice sharp. He hesitated again, his eyes flickering towards me, then away. Anonymous calls, he said finally. At first, they were just strange. Silent calls, or heavy breathing. I thought it was just a wrong number, or some kind of prank. He paused, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. But then they started talking. My heart began to pound again, a sense of unease creeping into my chest. Anonymous calls with heavy breathing? This was starting to sound creepy. What did they say? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. They said, they knew about you, he said, his voice trembling. They knew about us. They knew where you lived, where you worked. They threatened you. My breath caught in my throat. Threats? Against me? My mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was saying. Who would threaten me and why? Threatened me? Who? I asked, my voice trembling now. Who were these people? He shook his head, his eyes filled with fear and desperation. I don't know, he said. They never identified themselves. They knew things. Personal things. Things only someone who was watching us would know. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading for understanding. Sarah, I was terrified, he said. For you. For us. They said if I didn't disappear, they would hurt you. They would make you pay for being with me. My head was spinning. This was insane, like something out of a bad movie. But the fear in his eyes, the genuine terror in his voice, was undeniable. Could it be true? Could someone really be threatening us? And if so, why? But why? I stammered, my voice barely audible. Why would anyone threaten us? Who would want to hurt us? He shook his head again, his expression blank, lost. I don't know, he repeated. I swear, Sarah, I have no idea. I've racked my brain trying to figure it out. But I can't think of anyone who would want to do this to us. He looked down at his hands, twisting them nervously in his lap. At first, I tried to ignore them, he continued. I thought it was just some sick joke. But they kept calling, and the threats, they became more specific, more violent. He shuddered, his face pale. They knew about your routine, your friends, your family. They knew things they shouldn't have known. He looked up at me again, his eyes filled with anguish. Sarah, I was losing it. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, terrified that something was going to happen to you. He paused, taking a shaky breath. And then they gave me an ultimatum, he said, his voice barely a whisper. They said I had to disappear, completely. No contact with you, with anyone who knew us. They said if I didn't, they would make sure you regretted ever meeting me. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. This was unbelievable. And yet, as he spoke, a A chilling sense of dread began to settle in my stomach. The fear in his eyes felt real. The desperation in his voice was palpable. Could this really be the reason he had ghosted me? To protect me? It sounded insane. But then again, so did everything else about the last 3 months. And you just believed them? I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and hurt. You just ran? Without saying anything? Without even trying to talk to me? He flinched at my words, as if struck by a physical blow. Sarah, I didn't know what else to do, he said, his voice cracking. I was terrified. I thought if I just disappeared, if I cut all ties, they would leave you alone. I thought it was the only way to keep you safe. Tears streamed down my face now, hot and angry. But you didn't keep me safe, Liam, I cried, my voice rising again. You terrified me. You broke my heart. You left me to wonder if you were dead or alive, if I had done something wrong, if our entire relationship had been a lie. He reached out a hand towards me, then hesitated, letting it fall back into his lap. I know, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry, but I swear, Sarah, I did it because I loved you. Because I couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to you. His words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity, with a desperate plea for forgiveness. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the raw pain etched on his face, the genuine remorse in his eyes. And a part of me, a small, vulnerable part that still loved him despite everything, wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that his disappearance, his cruelty, had been born not of malice, but of fear, of a misguided attempt to protect me. But another part of me, the part that had endured months of agonizing uncertainty, of sleepless nights and tear-soaked pillows, was still screaming with anger, with betrayal, with the deep, gaping wound he had inflicted on my heart. But why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice softer now but still laced with pain. Why didn't you trust me? Why didn't you come to me with this? We could have figured it out together. We could have gone to the police. We could have done something. He shook his head, his gaze fixed on the floor again. I was scared, he whispered. They told me not to tell anyone. They said if I went to the police, they would make things worse. They said they had people everywhere, that they would know if I talked. He looked up at me again, his eyes filled with a desperate plea for understanding. And Sarah, I believed them, he said. I was so scared, so panicked. I panicked. I thought the best thing to do was to just disappear, to do exactly what they said. I thought that was the only way to keep you safe. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to collapse into his arms and cry. My emotions were a tangled mess, a chaotic storm raging within me. He had ghosted me. He had broken my heart. He had put me through hell. And now, he was telling me it was all for my own good. It was almost laughable. But the fear in his eyes, the tremor in his voice, the sheer desperation of his confession, it felt real. Too real to dismiss entirely. And you just stayed gone? I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. For 3 months? Without any contact? Without knowing if I was okay? Without knowing if I was even alive? He nodded slowly, his eyes filled with shame. I know, he whispered. It was torture. Every day was torture. I thought about you constantly. I wanted to call you, to reach out to tell you I was okay. But I was so afraid of putting you in danger. I thought the longer I stayed away, the safer you would be. He paused, taking a shaky breath. But then I couldn't take it anymore, he said, his voice cracking again. I was going crazy. I needed to see you. I needed to know you were okay, even if it meant risking everything. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. So I came back, he said. I came back to explain, to apologize, and to see if you were still willing to even talk to me. The silence stretched again, heavy with unspoken words, with the weight of our shattered past and the uncertain future stretching before us. I looked at him, at the broken man sitting on my sofa, and I saw not the ghoster, not the coward, but the Liam I had loved, the Liam who had always been kind, gentle and fiercely protective. And a flicker of something fragile and tentative stirred within me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding, perhaps, maybe. Just a tiny glimmer of understanding buried beneath the layers of pain and anger. Who do you think it is? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Who do you think is behind this? Who would want to hurt us? He shook his head, his expression blank, lost. I don't know, he repeated. I swear, Sarah, I have no idea. I've thought about it constantly, trying to make sense of it, but I can't think of anyone. He looked around the room, his eyes darting nervously. Maybe it's someone from my past, he said, his voice hesitant. Someone I wronged, without even realizing it. Someone who's holding a grudge. My brow furrowed. Liam had always been, well, he hadn't been perfect, but he had always been kind, considerate, and generally well-liked. He wasn't the type to make enemies, or so I thought. From your past? I repeated, my voice laced with skepticism. What kind of past, Liam? You work in finance. You're an accountant. Who from your past would want to threaten you, and me? He shrugged helplessly, his eyes filled with confusion and fear. I don't know, he repeated again. Maybe it's someone from work, someone who's jealous of my success, someone who wants to sabotage me. It sounded flimsy, weak, grasping at straws. But as I looked at his terrified face, at the genuine fear in his eyes, I knew deep down that he wasn't lying. He was genuinely terrified and genuinely clueless. And that, in a way, was even more terrifying. If he didn't know who was threatening us, how could we possibly protect ourselves? How could we possibly make this stop? The silence descended again, heavier this time, punctuated only by the frantic beating of my heart and the frantic buzzing of my thoughts. We sat there, frozen in time, two broken souls adrift in a sea of uncertainty and fear. The initial shock of his reappearance had worn off, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. His explanation, as improbable and unbelievable as it sounded, had a chilling ring of truth to it. The fear in his eyes was undeniable. The desperation in his voice was palpable, and the chilling thought that someone, somewhere, was watching us, threatening us, wanting to hurt us. It was enough to make my blood run cold. We need to go to the police, I said finally, my voice firm, decisive. We can't deal with this on our own. We need to tell them everything. About the calls, about the threats, about everything. He flinched, his eyes widening with fear. "No," he said, his voice sharp, panicked. "No, Sarah, we can't. You don't understand. They said if we went to the police, they would make things worse. They said they had people everywhere, that they would be watching us, that they would retaliate." "But Liam, we can't just do nothing," I argued, my voice rising again. "We can't just live in fear, waiting for them to make good on their threats. We need to fight back. We need to protect ourselves." He shook his head, his eyes filled with terror. "No, Sarah, please," he pleaded. "You don't understand. These people, they're dangerous. They're not messing around. If we go to the police, we'll be putting ourselves in even more danger. We need to disappear again. Both of us. We need to go somewhere they can't find us. Somewhere safe. Disappear again? Run away? Hide?" The idea was ludicrous, insane. But as I looked at his terrified face, at the genuine fear gripping him, I couldn't dismiss it entirely. He was genuinely convinced that going to the police would only make things worse. And maybe he was right. Maybe these people really were dangerous. Maybe going to the police would only escalate the situation, putting us in even more jeopardy. But running away, disappearing again, it felt like giving in, like surrendering to fear. And I wasn't sure I could do that. Not again. "And where would we go?" I asked, my voice laced with skepticism. "Where would we hide? We can't just vanish off the face of the earth, Liam. We have lives here. We have jobs, friends, families." "I don't care about any of that," he exclaimed, his voice rising in desperation. "None of that matters. The only thing that matters is keeping you safe, keeping us both safe. We can start over somewhere else. We can build new lives. Just please, Sarah. Please, trust me. Please let me protect you." His words, despite their desperation, resonated with a deep, undeniable sincerity. He was terrified, yes. But he was also fiercely protective. And a part of me, the part that still loved him, the part that still longed for his comfort and his strength, wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that he knew what he was doing, that he had a plan, that he could somehow keep us safe. But another part of me, the rational, logical part, was screaming that this was insane, that we were making a terrible mistake, that we needed to go to the police, to seek professional help, to fight back, not run away. "Liam, I don't know," I said, my voice trembling, torn between fear and reason, between love and logic. "I'm scared. I'm so scared. But I don't know if I can just run away again. Not without knowing who these people are, what they want, why they're doing this." He reached out and took my hands, his grip tight, desperate. "Sarah, please," he pleaded, his eyes searching mine, his voice filled with raw emotion. "Please trust me. I know this sounds crazy, but I swear it's the only way. We need to disappear. Tonight. Right now. Before they come back. Before they do something terrible." His words hung in the air, heavy with urgency, with a chilling sense of impending doom. And as I looked into his terrified eyes, as I felt the desperation in his grip, as I listened to the frantic pounding of my own heart, a terrifying realization dawned on me. He wasn't just scared. He was convinced. Convinced that we were in imminent danger. Convinced that running away was our only option. And maybe Maybe he was right. Maybe we were already too late. Maybe they were already watching us. Maybe they were already closing in. A sudden shiver ran down my spine. The silence of my apartment, which had felt so comforting just hours ago, now felt menacing, oppressive, filled with unseen eyes and unheard threats. The ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece suddenly sounded like a countdown, and the knock on the door, the one that had brought Liam back into my life, now felt like a harbinger of something far more sinister, something that was about to shatter the fragile remnants of my world. "Okay," I whispered finally, my voice barely audible, surrendering to fear, surrendering to him, surrendering to the terrifying unknown that lay ahead. "Okay, Liam, let's go." We moved quickly, silently, like thieves in the night. Liam, surprisingly, seemed to have a plan. He had a backpack already packed, hidden in the trunk of his car, parked a few blocks away. He had cash, a burner phone, and a vague destination in mind. A remote cabin in the mountains, far from the city, far from anyone who knew us. He moved with a frantic energy, driven by fear, by a desperate need to escape. I, on the other hand, moved in a daze, my mind still reeling from the shock of his reappearance, the absurdity of his explanation, and the terrifying reality of our current situation. I grabbed a few essentials, clothes, toiletries, my passport, stuffing them into a small duffel bag, my hands trembling so badly I could barely zip it closed. We left my apartment as we had arrived, silently, stealthily, leaving no trace of our presence. As we stepped out into the cool night air, I glanced back at my building, at the darkened windows of my apartment, a wave of sadness washing over me, leaving my life behind, abandoning everything I knew, everything I had worked for a terrifying unknown. It felt like a surrender, like a defeat. But as I looked at Liam's face, at the fear etched in every line, at the desperate determination in his eyes, I knew there was no turning back. We were in this together, for better or for worse. We walked quickly, silently, through the deserted streets, our footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. Liam led the way, his pace hurried, his gaze darting nervously around as if expecting someone to jump out of the shadows at any moment. We reached his car, a nondescript sedan parked on a quiet side street. He unlocked the trunk, pulled out the backpack and tossed it into the back seat. Then he opened the passenger door for me, his eyes meeting mine for a brief, fleeting moment. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" he asked, his voice low, hesitant. "There's still time to change your mind. We could still go to the police. We could still..." I shook my head, cutting him off. "No," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. "We're doing this. We're going. But, Liam, you need to be honest with me. Is there anything you're not telling me? Anything else I need to know?" He hesitated for a moment, his eyes flickering away again. Then he took a deep breath and met my gaze, his expression serious, sincere. "No, Sarah," he said. "I swear. I've told you everything. Everything I know. Everything I understand. I promise." I looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception, any flicker of dishonesty. But all I saw was fear, desperation, and a desperate plea for trust. And in that moment, despite all my doubts, all my fears, all my reservations, I chose to believe him. I chose to trust him. Again. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Okay, Liam. I trust you." He nodded, a small, grateful smile flickering across his lips. Then he closed the door, walked around to the driver's side and slid behind the wheel. He started the engine, the rumble echoing in the quiet night. And then, without another word, without looking back, we drove away, leaving my life, my city, my past behind us, disappearing into the darkness. The city lights faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by the black expanse of the open road. The silence in the car was heavy, oppressive, broken only by the hum of the engine and the frantic beating of my heart. I stared out the window, watching the world blur past, my mind racing, my thoughts a chaotic jumble of fear, confusion, and a strange, unsettling sense of anticipation. What awaited us in the mountains? Would we be safe there? Would we ever be safe again? And who were these people who were threatening us, who had driven us from our lives, who had turned our world upside down? The questions swirled in my mind, unanswered, unresolved, adding to the growing sense of dread that was settling in my stomach. Beside me, Liam drove in silence, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his expression grim, determined. He seemed focused, resolute, as if he knew exactly where we were going, exactly what we needed to do. But beneath the surface of his outward composure, I could sense the same fear, the same desperation that was gripping me. We were running. We were hiding. We were fugitives in our own lives. And we had no idea where we were running to, or what we were running from, or if we would ever truly escape. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless, leading us deeper and deeper into the unknown. And as the miles flew by and the darkness deepened, a chilling thought crept into my mind, a thought that sent a shiver of ice down my spine. What if we weren't running away from danger? What if we were running right into it? The cabin was even more remote than I had imagined, nestled deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a winding dirt road. It felt isolated, secluded, almost eerie. It was small, rustic, and sparsely furnished, with a wood-burning stove for heat, a generator for electricity, and no cell service or internet access. It was exactly what Liam had described, a safe haven, a place to disappear, to hide from the world. But as we stepped out of the car into the cool mountain air, under the cloak of a starless night, a sense of unease washed over me. The silence was profound, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the wind and the distant hooting of an owl. It was a silence that felt heavy, expectant, as if the woods themselves were watching us, waiting for something to happen. Liam, however, seemed relieved. He took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air, his shoulders relaxing slightly, as if he had finally reached a place of safety, a place of refuge. He unlocked the cabin door, and we stepped inside, into the dimly lit interior. The air was musty, stale, smelling of damp wood and disuse. Liam flipped a switch and the generator sputtered to life, casting a weak, flickering light across the room. The cabin was small, consisting of a single room with a small kitchenette in one corner, a rickety table and chairs in the center, and a double bed tucked into the opposite corner. There was a small bathroom off to the side, and a wood-burning stove stood in the corner, radiating a faint warmth. It was basic, rudimentary, but it was shelter. And for now, that was all that mattered. Liam busied himself unpacking the backpack, pulling out blankets, food supplies, and a small propane stove. He seemed focused, efficient, as if he had done this before. As if disappearing, running away, was something he was familiar with. The thought sent a chill down my spine. "So," I said, my voice echoing in the small cabin, breaking the oppressive silence. "What now?" He looked up from unpacking, his eyes meeting mine. "Now," he said, his voice calm, steady, almost reassured. "Now we wait." Wait? Wait for what? Wait for them to find us? Wait for the threats to escalate? Wait for our lives to be completely destroyed? The idea was unbearable. "Wait for what, Liam?" I asked, my voice laced with frustration. "We can't just sit here and do nothing. We need to figure out who these people are, what they want, and how to stop them." He shook his head, his expression firm, resolute. "No, Sarah," he said. "That's exactly what we can't do. We can't try to fight them. We can't try to investigate. We can't do anything that might draw attention to ourselves. We need to lay low. We need to disappear. We need to wait for them to lose interest, to move on." Lose interest? Move on? Was that really his plan? To just hide in the woods and hope that our tormentors would eventually get bored and leave us alone? It sounded naive, unrealistic, almost pathetic. But as I looked at his face, at the unwavering conviction in his eyes, I realized he wasn't going to be swayed. He had made up his mind. This was his plan. And I, it seemed, had no choice but to go along with it. "And how long do we wait, Liam?" I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. "A week? A month? A year? Are we just going to spend the rest of our lives hiding in this cabin? Waiting for nothing?" He shrugged, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," he said. "As long as it takes. Until it's safe to come back. Until they're gone." Gone. The word hung in the air, heavy with ambiguity, with a chilling sense of finality. Gone where? Gone how? And what if they never went away? What if they found us here? What if they were already watching us, even now, from the shadows of the woods? A shiver ran down my spine, a cold, creeping dread that settled deep in my bones. We were alone, isolated, vulnerable, and we had no idea what we were up against. The silence in the cabin stretched again, thick and heavy, broken only by the crackling of the wood-burning stove and the frantic beating of my heart. We were trapped in this remote cabin, trapped in this terrifying situation, trapped in a web of fear and uncertainty that seemed to have no escape. And as the darkness deepened and the silence pressed in, a chilling realization dawned on me. A realization that was far more terrifying than any threat, any phone call, any anonymous warning. We weren't running away from danger. We were running away from reality. And in doing so, we were losing ourselves, losing our lives, losing everything that mattered. And I had no idea if we would ever find our way back, or if there was even a way back to find. The night stretched ahead, long and dark and uncertain, and in the heart of the silent woods,